Hello everyone, good evening. This is Vimal again coming to you from COP26. Today is day 2 of this session here, and in one word, if I was to describe it, it is huge. Today morning when I entered here, there was a queue so long that it took almost 1 hour to get the delegates in, and yet the queue was almost unending. I must say that today was also a day of some great, wonderful meetings, lot of action, because today is also the second day of the political leaders dialogue, which will conclude briefly, and there are a lot of announcements made by the political leadership, and now the action has begun on the technical sessions, and there is a lot of dynamic dialogue taking place between the teams. I must also say that at the same time, if I was to describe what I see today, I would have 3 words. One, passion, a lot of passion, and I'll come to a specific mention of why I feel so. The second, serious discussion on funding and funding for carbon neutrality, funding for technologies, funding for developing economies. And the third, very interesting emphasis that I see now coming up is on policy and policy initiative required, because the political dialogue has thrown up a lot of political need for policymakers to move, and so a lot of policy initiatives are being discussed behind closed doors. As I'm coming to you, I'm sure there are parleys going on as to what is the common shared policy initiative that the political leadership can take forward. One interesting fact that has come to light over here is that many people don't know too much about standards, and when I talk to them about IEC being 115 years young organization, it's perhaps one of the the oldest, longest serving organizations here at COP26, and so that's when people get to listen to our story. I talk about interoperability, reliability, safety, which were traditionally built into IEC standards, and how we've been serving sustainability also, and the work we are now doing to really pivot on sustainability, our whole standardization work. There are a lot of takers for this message, and I believe that IEC has its work cut out for it. I think the global community is expecting us to deliver on this work. In terms of meetings, I've had some wonderful meetings today, and to start off, had a personal meeting with the Indian Minister for Environment, Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, a brilliant gentleman, very humble and polite, and it was inspiring for me to have this dialogue with him, because he was talking about people first, and he was talking about making an inclusive environment for the future. At the British Pavilion, I had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Malcolm D. McCulloch. Do excuse me for the pronunciation. He is currently the head of Energy and Power Group, Department of Engineering Science at the Oxford University. And at Oxford University, they're doing a very interesting research around how data-based modern smart grids can be developed, keeping people in the center of it, and how the digital technologies, digitalization that we see is impacting all this work. So, of course, we talked about his wonderful work and how does he plan to take it global, and of course, that was the perfect plug for me also to start talking about international standards. And I think we both agreed that contact between the Oxford University and the BSI, and then from BSI to the IEC, to talk about smart grids in a bigger way. I think that would. I talked about passion in the beginning, and the passion I see here is primarily coming from the youth of across the world. Let me give you a few examples of the people I've met today. All youngsters, all below, maybe in their 20s or early 30s. For example, I met Theophil, who's representing an NGO called CITES, and their main objective is to bring the plight of nations which are small islands and which are being inundated and coming under water more often than not, bringing their plight to the global people, global audience. Handicap International, especially working on the plight of people with disabilities and how they are impacted by climate change. Then I met with Bright Nare, who's from Rwanda and working in off-grid communities to bring together education and healthcare along with electricity access for productive use. So very interesting mix of different SDGs, but all focusing on SDG 7. Robert, who's part of the government in Kenya, but trying to bring about the right policy initiatives from Kenya, all youngsters. And a very interesting NGO, yes, DC. I thought it was direct current, but then the card says Young in Energy Specialists and Development Cooperation. Of course, they talk about DC microgrids, but it's about a larger sense of DC in terms of development cooperation and young professionals working in the space of energy, something close to what our affiliates program would be. Then finally, ProVeg, NGO from which I met with Marcus, who are trying to see the impact of food traveling long distances and how it is impacting climate change. With this is all for today, and I look forward to interacting with you again tomorrow from COP26 in Glasgow. This is Vimal Mahendru signing off.